There was a time when Bivol and Ekaterina looked like the perfect boxing love story. For more than 15 years, Ekaterina stood beside Bivol as he transformed from a hungry young fighter into one of the most brilliant tactical champions in modern boxing. Fast forward to the aftermath of their divorce, and the accusations, courtroom battles, and bitter war had spilled across social media, with Ekaterina even seen celebrating as Dmitry suffered a devastating loss to Artur Beterbiev. Renowned across the globe for his surgical precision and eerie composure inside the ring, Bivol built his reputation on control. Under the scorching glare of stadium lights, he moves with chilling poise, outclassing opponents through sheer technical mastery. But outside the ropes, that same control will be tested by a very different kind of fight. Just ahead of some of the most important chapters of his career, his former spouse, Ekaterina Bivol, unleashed an unbridled public crusade. She flooded digital platforms with explosive claims, sharp grievances, and provocative demands, turning a private family breakdown into a very public war. Did this ongoing digital storm ultimately bleed into his focus between the ropes? Today, we examine the true story behind Dmitry Bivol's private life, how a decade-and-a-half-long marriage unraveled into bitter public warfare, and how the Matrix handled one of the heaviest psychological storms of his career. To understand how everything fell apart, we have to go back to where it all began. Back when Bivol was merely an ambitious amateur and a rising contender grinding through the sport's lower rungs, Ekaterina stood firmly beside him. She served as a steady anchor through the lean financial years, accompanying him to regional bouts while keeping the household stable as he chased his boxing career. They welcomed 2 sons into the world, and by all public appearances, their relationship appeared rock solid. In early media appearances, Bivol consistently spoke of his wife with deep appreciation and respect, highlighting her as a grounded, educated partner who managed domestic life, drove the kids to school and hockey practices, and handled everything at home so he could dedicate himself entirely to his craft. For years, the bond looked unbreakable, but success has a way of changing everything. The first major cracks in their relationship appear in the aftermath of the biggest victory of Bivol's career, his stunning upset of Canelo Alvarez in May 2022. Beating Canelo transformed Bivol's career overnight. He became a global star, his purses grew, and the demands on his time grew with them. But from Ekaterina's perspective, that meteoric rise became a source of growing tension inside their marriage. Ekaterina later claimed that everything changed after the Canelo triumph. Caught up in heavy promotional obligations, nonstop training camps, and the relentless demands of a global career, he grew increasingly absent from the home front. As Bivol chased all-time greatness, the emotional gulf between them widened into an uncrossable divide. Feeling isolated, resentful, and abandoned, Ekaterina began harboring intense skepticism regarding her husband's earnings, convinced that a massive influx of multi-million-dollar purses was being concealed from her and the children. By 2023, the marriage was over, but the divorce was only the beginning. What followed would turn a private family breakdown into one of boxing's most public personal disputes. Following the legal separation, she took her grievances straight to social media, launching a relentless stream of accusations against her former husband. Financial support sat squarely at the epicenter of her public campaign. Outraged by court-mandated frameworks, she announced to her expanding audience that Dmitry was contributing a mere $1,100 monthly in child support despite pulling in massive 7-figure paydays. She alleged that Bivol was hiding substantial amounts of money in overseas accounts to avoid his financial obligations. The escalation didn't stop at finances. In a twist that stunned the combat sports community, Ekaterina dragged up elements of Bivol's distant past, sharing raw claims about his youth. Through unfiltered online broadcasts, she alleged that prior to turning 22, Bivol had ties to street-level drug sales, a chapter she claimed only came to light long after they were wed. These bombshell declarations triggered an absolute media frenzy. Tabloids rushed to cover the story, fans debated his past, and digital spaces turned into a battlefield. Yet Bivol largely refused to engage publicly, maintaining his characteristic silence rather than participating in the mudslinging. As he knuckled down for his historic, undisputed championship showdown against Artur Beterbiev, Ekaterina's digital crusade escalated into something increasingly erratic and destructive. She began broadcasting intimate glimpses of his private life, leaking confidential agreements, and even revealing pre-fight physical ailments, injury status, and training camp hardships to the public eye. For a fighter preparing for the biggest fight of his life, this was an extraordinary amount of noise to carry into camp. Yet, Bivol responded the only way he seemed to know how, by staying silent, staying in the gym, and refusing to let the chaos pull him away from the fight. Inside the ring, he had built his reputation on the same principle: absorb the pressure, stay composed, and refuse to crack. Reflecting with characteristic calm on the marital breakdown, Bivol offered only a measured perspective to inquiring reporters. Divorce is a tough thing to go through for both people. Beneath his composed exterior, however, legal and financial sparring was intensifying fiercely behind closed doors. At the heart of the dispute lay a prenuptial agreement Ekaterina had signed during happier times, an arrangement she grew to resent deeply as her monetary expectations expanded. Dima engaged to pay me $300,000. I gave him a 3-room apartment. It was stupid of me, Ekaterina confessed during heated online streams. She maintained that Dmitry had committed to $200,000 for a property alongside $100,000 pulled from a multi-million-dollar common pool. When she felt those agreements had not been honored, the dispute became increasingly public. Then, with the Beterbiev fight approaching, the dispute reached a point that could no longer be ignored. Ekaterina took her campaign to another level. She wasn't simply demanding money anymore. She was calling for the biggest fight of Bivol's career to be canceled. She actively called on fans, media figures, and sanctioning bodies to cancel the fight and blackball her former partner. She insisted that Dmitry hand over 33% of his career earnings for their children, a demand that conflicted with the terms of the prenuptial agreement she had previously signed. The public feud polarized the combat sports landscape. One camp argued fiercely that a father bears an absolute duty to provide generously for his children, legal technicalities and prenuptial agreements notwithstanding. Critics, meanwhile, accused Ekaterina of using the dispute, and even the children, as leverage in a very public financial battle. For Dmitry Bivol, the ambient noise was deafening. While sports commentators dissected his personal affairs and social media forums erupted with debate, he had to step into the gym, empty his mind, and prepare to face one of the most destructive punchers in the sport with the echoes of a fractured home ringing in his ears. To what extent did this grueling personal storm impact his performance against Artur Beterbiev? It's impossible to measure exactly how much the divorce affected Bivol inside the ring. But one thing was undeniable. He entered one of the most important fights of his career while dealing with an extraordinary amount of personal turmoil outside it. In a bout as razor-sharp and tactical as their undisputed clash, even the smallest margins can matter. When a fighter's psychological reserves are drained by legal battles, public exposure, and family separation, achieving absolute perfection becomes an uphill battle. In the end, Dmitry Bivol's story is a reminder that even the calmest fighters can face battles that no training camp can prepare them for. Inside the ring, Bivol has spent his career solving problems with precision, patience, and control. But outside the ropes, there are no judges, no game plan, and no final bell. But perhaps the most difficult fight was the one nobody could see, and long after the cameras move on and the digital noise fades, the consequences of that battle can remain long after the final bell.